Hello, this is George from George's Music Blog, and today I'm talking about the third album by Squarepusher, Music is Rotted One Note. This is part of a series I've created on Squarepusher's Discography, and you can check out more of those videos in the description below. I'm a long-time fan of Squarepusher. He is one of my favourite artists of any genre, so these are not intended to be unbiased reviews, just the opinion of a fan. If you're a Squarepusher obsessive like me, then hopefully you'll find my perspective interesting. If you're new to his music and you want to hear a bit more about what it's all about, then you've come to the right place. So let's get into it. Music is Rotted One Note, which I will hereafter refer to as Rotted, was Squarepusher's third album released on Warp Records in 1998. And in contrast to everything he put out up to that point, obviously 2 previous albums and a slew of EPs and other releases, it was produced solely using live instruments with no sequencers or digital manipulation of sounds whatsoever. There's no getting away from it. Rotted is an unusual album in Squarepusher's discography, and I might as well say up front, it's not a record I could ever truly get into. But since I am planning to create a video for every album in his catalogue, it seems only right to include it here, and I will give it more than a fair hearing. Tom Jenkinson has always been upfront about the fact that he does not like to be pigeonholed as an artist, and it seems clear to me that music is a process of exploration and discovery for him. With each new phase, he's trying out new ideas, trying out new technology, constantly innovating and experimenting. Even though he could probably make a more reliable living, trotting out something a little bit more predictable and formulaic to the same core fan base. Thus, Rotted could be seen as something of a reaction against the burgeoning attention he received for his previous 2 releases on Warp, namely the Hard Normal Daddy album and the Big Loader EP. With his star in the ascendancy and that style that he was creating, what was often referred to as drill and bass, but you might call progressive post-rave breakbeat, having a bit of a moment, what better time to confound everyone's expectations and do something completely different? One of his subsequent albums was titled Do You Know Squarepusher, but that might have been a more fitting title for this one. In a way, Rotted reminds me of Animal Rights by Moby, another record where an artist had achieved some decent success and a reputation for a certain kind of sound, and whether as a statement of artistic freedom or just to surprise everybody, decided to do something completely different. For Animal Rights, Moby also took on the challenge of writing everything himself, playing every instrument himself, although unlike Squarepusher, he did at least work with a producer in his efforts to record an album inspired by hardcore punk. Unlike Rotted, for Moby, Animal Rights was both a critical and commercial failure, whereas at least for Squarepusher, although Rotted divided fans, it was praised critically in some quarters, and I think has found a home among a portion of the Squarepusher fan base. Music is Rotted One Note is essentially Squarepusher's take on jazz fusion. I am by no means a jazz expert, not even a jazz intermediate. I'm not familiar with the different signifiers or the different subgenres, so I'm entrusting the verdict of the internet that this is what is generally referred to as jazz fusion, namely a fusion of jazz with other styles such as rock, rhythm and blues, and funk. And it's characterized by a more exploratory, improvisational style featuring more electronic instruments such as electric guitar, piano, bass, drums and synthesizers. And it's clear even to me, a jazz noob, that Rotted is pretty far removed from something like swing or big band jazz. The vibe is very much experimental, avant-garde, led by electric guitar, bass and synthesizers. In fact, I don't think there's any trumpet, sax, trombones, no brass instruments or even any wind instruments to be found whatsoever on the record. Now imagine, if you will, a porter cabin at the end of a row of similar structures. If you went to school in the UK in the 70s, 80s or 90s, you know the kind of building I mean. Crumbling wooden slats on the outside, concrete steps leading up to a door. Inside, a threadbare carpet that was once red but has now faded to the generic shade of dirt. Against one wall, some dilapidated sofas. Maybe they were once brown, but now they have faded to the colour of a cigarette filter. The windows are all taped over with newspaper. The air is thick with the smell of dust, hash smoke and joss sticks. Opposite the sofas are some instruments. A drum kit held together by sellotape and mic'd up with a solitary microphone. An electric guitar, a bass guitar, a bank of synthesizers. A couple of amps, a tangled mess of cables and effects pedals. Off to one side, a flip chart with reams of paper hanging off it covered in scrawls of marker pen. Behind the amps, fiddling with a plug socket, is a skinny bloke with a beard and a ponytail. Welcome to the world of Music is Rotted One Note. As an album, it's a hermetically sealed work existing outside of time or contemporary mores. It is the sound of someone experimenting, indulging some of their wilder ideas without concern for commercial success or even the validation of peers. Tonally, it paints a drab picture in washed out monochrome. Mentally, it is very inward looking. This is cerebral, reflective music, almost solipsistic at times. None of which I mean in a negative light. All of that might be just your kind of thing. Now let's get into the details. Breaking down this album by specific tracks doesn't make as much sense to me as with other Squarepusher releases, but I will mention a few specifics. Chunk S basically introduces the album with a funky bass, guitar and drum combination that draws heavily from classic 70s funk and very much sets the smoky live lounge vibe of the record. Following that, Don't Go Plastic veers off into experimental territory with discordant piano and arrhythmic drums that don't so much create a rhythm as sound like a swarm of flies trying to escape from a sealed room. It's interesting, I don't know if Tom Jenkinson always planned to create an album called Go Plastic somewhere down the line, or whether he was just retrospectively referring back to this piece with the creation of that album. The first half of Rotted alternates between experimental pieces in the vein of Don't Go Plastic, featuring rushing arrhythmic drum work and meditative solo forays on bass, electric piano and guitar, pieces like Dust Switch and Circular Flexing, and alternately 2-minute shorter pieces of pure experimentalism, tracks like Parallelogram Bin and Curve 1, both of which sound like someone playing somewhat aimlessly with the knobs on a synthesizer. They add to the generally unsettled and insular vibe of the album, but musically don't do much for me. The real highlight of the album comes a little over halfway with the track My Sound. It is the first one on the album to feature a distinctive hook and a beat that is consistent enough that you can actually tap your foot along with it. Despite the undeniable groove, much like the rest of the record, the vibe is very much downbeat and offers a washed out colour palette. It feels like the sound of walking home on your own in the rain with your head down and your hood up. You're down, but you're not out. There's a little hint of optimism there, and I really feel like the lo-fi production of this record plays to the strengths of this track. I can really see that drum kit when I hear that snare drum roll and those hi-hat hits, and the bass and electric guitar are present behind your left and right shoulders like two familiar friends. It's a really visible soundstage, unlike the rest of the record where the instrumentation all seems to come together in a fuzzy grey smear. The final third of Rotted continues much in the same vein as the first two, alternating between bracingly avant-garde jazz fusion and shorter interludes of pure synthesizer experimentalism. Tracks like Step 1 and Ruin are the glue that bind the longer tracks together to create the whole, but in their own right they don't really go anywhere or offer the listener much joy. Not this listener anyway. Last App Roach rounds things out in pretty definitive style, with a somber kick drum meting out a glacial tempo of around 40 BPM, underneath overlapping layers of drone and electronic feedback. Much like the rest of the album, it is bleakly monochromatic, but at least it ends proceedings in a decisive manner. On reflection, I think artists should always be applauded for trying something new, for experimenting, for testing out new ideas, for broadening their sound palette and refusing to be pigeonholed. Sure, it doesn't always come off, but the world would be a dull place if everyone played it safe all the time. Music Is Rotted One Note feels like a record that Squarepusher needed to make. Jazz had always been part of his musical DNA right from the get-go. So although it was unlike anything he'd put out up to that point, it wasn't like it was a complete bolt from the blue. As he had said in an interview at some point, it's not like he was ever going to record an album of country music. So while Rotted is not an album I can truly say I enjoy, I respect its existence and I'll vouch that it succeeds on its own terms. It creates a very distinctive vibe and feeling, a smoky, insular world, just not one that appeals to me very much. Maybe if I'd gone deep with this album back in the day, when the influence of cannabis would have made what Rotted offers much more appealing, but as things are now, I can't see myself revisiting it all that often. Although I will need to add my sound to some kind of playlist. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks so much for watching. Please check out my channel for more of the same. Please like the video if you're still watching at this point, and let me know what you think. Is Music Is Rotted One Note your favourite Squarepusher album, or maybe like me, you're not so keen? I'd love to hear from you. Okay, till next time, peace out. Goodbye.